Star blessings. I want to talk about Jupiter in Taurus, the transit of Jupiter in Taurus, which starts, I think, tomorrow. So the last time Jupiter was in Taurus was 12 years ago. And probably the most simple way to start would be to say, okay, well, where is Jupiter going to be for you in your natal chart? Because that's going to personalize the experience of Jupiter. Everyone gets really hyped up about Jupiter transits, and I can understand it. And it's great because it serves as a sense of inspiration, which is what Jupiter does. It injects that sense of faith and inspiration and optimism and hope and confidence and the desire to expand ourselves, our experience on this planet. But I just want to remind us all that whilst Jupiter is the greater benefic in terms of traditional astrology, and it does have, first of all, it has some shadow sides to it as well, and that would be things like overconfidence, sloppiness, not being cautious where you might have to be sometimes, overconfidence, over exaggeration of things and so forth. And in Taurus, there can be an insatiable level of greed as well. So even though, Jupiter offers us that sense of hope, faith, and inspiration, we also need to read it from the point of view of the archetype of Taurus and also where it's transiting in our chart. And also, one thing to always keep in mind, and this applies to any planet, every transit you are observing in your own chart at any given moment, it is always very important to go back to your natal chart and look at that planet in your natal chart. What is the condition of that planet in your chart? What sign is it in? What house is it in? What aspects does it have? If you have this is my opinion through my observation of astrology over a very long period of time. If you have a Jupiter in your natal chart that is, let's say, debilitated, right, which would have to be in the signs of Gemini, Capricorn, just forgot the other one. It'll come back to me. But if your Jupiter is in debility, let's say, then it says something about the way Jupiter operates for you. So if Jupiter is debilitated, which it is in the signs of, let's see, Virgo, thank you, Virgo, Gemini, and Capricorn, the opposite signs to those three signs is where Jupiter has dignity, right, which is Sagittarius, Pisces, Cancer. So it rules Sagittarius, it rules Pisces, and is exalted in Cancer. So the opposite signs, Virgo, Gemini, Capricorn, is where it is said that Jupiter has debility. Now, the terms dignity and debility, derive from ancient astrology, and even though on some level from an evolutionary perspective, we do evolve, transform, transcend, and so forth. But there is something inherently valuable about understanding the essential dignities and debilities, because if a planet is debilitated, it is going to either operate differently, or in the case of Jupiter, something will, the sign that Jupiter is in, where it's debilitated, it drains the goodness of Jupiter, as it were. The sign gets all the benefit, right? So if you had Jupiter in Virgo, right, the Virgo components will, really benefit greatly from Jupiter, but then Jupiter kind of gets drained from the energy of Virgo. So, simple example, somebody with Jupiter in Virgo might be amazing with all the Virgo things, with order, with structure, with technique, with method, with health, routines and so forth, really excel and be really amazing at delivering in those ways. But then Jupiter misses out. Jupiter's greatness and Jupiter's benefic nature tends to get drained from the debility of the sign. That's an important thing to consider when you are looking at any transit in your chart. It's not the ultimate decider of the whole picture, but it does have an influence. So the opposite to that, of course, is if you've got a Jupiter that's in rulership or exaltation, which is Pisces, Sag, and Cancer. Cancer is its exaltation position. It is more likely that the Jupiter transits will deliver the utmost ability that that planet has, because its inherent birth, where it was when you were born, was in its natural position, in its greatest position, in its elevated position. So it has the goods to back up the transits as it goes around the chart. That's just something to really keep in mind when you are looking at this Jupiter in Taurus transit. Now, Jupiter in Taurus doesn't have any dignity or debility, but there are some signs where Jupiter, whilst it doesn't have dignity or debility, does really, really well. So in Taurus, it does really well. In Aries, Jupiter does really well. In Scorpio, most of the signs, Jupiter does really well. It's the debilitated signs where there might be something that is missing in a way, because the sign drains the goodness of Jupiter. So in Taurus, Taurus is about sustainability, security, foundations, resources, internal resources, self-worth, stability, building, things of that nature, stabilizing things, right? So Jupiter in Aries for the last year has begun a whole new evolutionary cycle for all of us, right? It started at the beginning of the zodiac. And so, there's been this excitement with Jupiter in Aries, really sort of, it's all guns blazing in Aries, right? It's a fire sign. It's the first sign of the zodiac. It's the inception, the beginning of all things. So there's a lot of enthusiasm about starting new journeys and creating new things, and just simply having the confidence to start things, right? That would be Jupiter in Aries, having a fearless kind of approach to things, and just plunging in. That's Aries. And so now we come to Taurus, where things need to be more steady. Things need to slow down a little bit. Slow and steady wins the race, right? Like I said in my video yesterday, in the new moon Taurus video. And one quote that my friend mentor that said this to me the other day, the other week, whenever it was, and I feel it's such a profound statement for Jupiter in Taurus, because Jupiter ignites that enthusiasm and confidence and courage to just go for it, right? To have that level of confidence to go for whatever it is you're wanting to go for. And Taurus can be very, very greedy, very, very greedy. It's just how it is. If you think about the psychological development of all the archetypes, when we get to Taurus, Taurus represents the senses, the body, the physical world. If you think about the child, when a baby is born, which is Aries, that toddler stage where they call it the terrible twos, that's the toddler that starts to form a relationship and an identification and an understanding and an experience of the physical world. That's why you see toddlers putting everything in their mouth, touching everything. That's Taurus, because the senses are just so animated. So translate that into an adult Taurus version, if you like. It's that very strong desire for the material world, right? To have things, to collect things, to build and have more. It can never have enough. Taurus is always sitting opposite Scorpio, and it's not often spoken about, from what I've observed, at least online. Taurus is never described as a difficult house, but it is difficult because it sits opposite Scorpio. So the Taurus archetype at a very unconscious level is that desire to want to have it all. And the paranoia, Scorpio sitting opposite, that somebody's going to take it away from me. It's a funny thing, but I've seen this a lot in Taurians, actually. So here's the line that I wanted to say. We can have everything, but not all at once. And I think that there's so much wisdom in that statement. And if we could understand that statement and not only understand it intellectually, but understand it from a soul level and an esoteric level, I think it can help us understand our life a lot more, right? Because many people, if not all of us, we want everything. We want to have it all, as it were, right? We're not supposed to have it all in one lifetime, and that is why we don't. And Jupiter in Taurus probably wants a lot, right? And we have to remember, Jupiter in Taurus it's not going to provide everything for us, but sure, it will give us some sense of inspiration, confidence and courage, and enthusiasm towards having some more, let's say. But let's talk about the element of Jupiter that is more about wisdom, right? So in Taurus, what would the wisdom be? The wisdom would be the wisdom of nature, of the earth, of the body, right? Having a closer relationship to nature. I think one of the biggest apparent losses, if you like, or apparent disconnections of the human race is the disconnection from nature, because of the level of distractions that have been created to take us up into the cerebral mental sphere of overloaded information, constantly being, pulled in so many different directions and distractions, particularly with the technological world, right? And everything that has brought to our field of experience, some of which is fantastic, and a lot of which has taken us away from being more in touch with our physical body and nature, where all healing, all harmony, and all natural beauty emanates from nature. That's where true balance exists, right? And let's not forget that Taurus is a Venus-ruled sign. So the components of Venus speaking to Taurus do draw in those levels of harmony and balance and peace and beauty, and being more in touch with that, slowing down, right? Because the world is so busy, right? It's so busy, it's so chaotic at the moment, and has been for quite some time, especially in the last 3 years with these accelerated portals and things that have been activated. There is so much going on, and we are bombarded from every single direction. And I think Taurus really reminds us to just slow down, smell the roses, right? Stand with nature, stand on the grass, go for a walk, just be present, that slowing down. I think that's really healthy and really important. So the Jupiter wisdom in Taurus can really remind us of the inherent wisdom in Gaia, in Mother Earth, in our physical body, and just how powerful our own physical vessel is. Think about everything that it does for us, from sleeping to speaking to us with everything that's going on, everything that we need, that internal clock which is connected to the moon, and the moon's exalted in Taurus. The moon is the container of our body, right? So our body speaks to us all the time, But the point I'm trying to make is that we've really moved so far away from our core and our center, and remembering just to kind of stand still. So I see a lot of wisdom with Jupiter and Taurus on this level. You know, there's going to be you know, a lot of different people that will be more focused on the resources level, on the material level, on how can I have more, how can I create more. That's fine, each to their own. But I don't think it's realistic to assume that because Jupiter is in Taurus, you know, everyone's going to become wealthy. It's just so delusional. It's not a reality. But we can utilize, tune into this portal in a way that can help us stabilize what we are creating in our own life, stabilize stronger foundations from a point of authenticity as well, especially while Uranus is in Taurus and has been there for a while. It's really about getting back in touch with our authentic self and the authentic inherent rhythms and balance of nature and our body. So Jupiter in Taurus will be a journey, you know, for the next 12 months for all of us, depending on, of course, which house it's in as well. That's going to add another field. But, well, that's going to be the field of how that Jupiter in Taurus expresses and manifests for you. And I suppose it's worth then thinking about, well, where was Jupiter 12 years ago? It's going to be in the same place again. So each house reflects different components of life, right? Now, Jupiter moving through the 7th house, for instance, somebody might think to themselves, oh, you know, this would be a relationship. It's not necessarily the case. What is the condition of your 7th house? You know, what's the ruling planet to that house? Where is Jupiter natally? You know, these are all things that need to be considered. If you are looking at the aspect of life relating to relationships, because you really want to be in a relationship, and Jupiter's moving through your 7th, you need to also be looking at everything else that's happening in conjunction to the 7th house, and any other transit or secondary progression or primary direction or Fidaria periods or annual perfections. You know, there's so many layers of things to be pulling in together and integrating to try and get a more holistic view of that particular house in the chart. Just Jupiter moving through the 7th is not necessarily going to bring a relationship as such, but Jupiter in the 7th might bring experiences that connect you to certain individuals where you have a really rich connection with somebody that provides a sense of real growth through that partnership. For instance, it can be a friendship, it can be a business partnership, it can be sitting in therapy, because the 7th house is any one-on-one interaction you have, for instance, right? So Jupiter moving through the 7th could be meeting a teacher, an astrology teacher, some other kind of teacher, a mentor, any type of teacher, really, just a teacher that is symbolized by wisdom, or an individual that has a lot of wisdom, and they pass through your life while Jupiter's moving through the 7th, and you establish this connection with them, and they just bring a lot of richness and wisdom in your life in that way, right? So there are many different possibilities, right? It's really about understanding, it's going back to your natal chart, understanding where Jupiter is natally and everything about Jupiter natally in the chart, and everything else that's happening at the same time. But just very broadly speaking, generally speaking, Jupiter and Taurus is about our journey towards growing and expanding in the wisdom of our own inner sustainability, security, trusting our body, being more in touch and more grounded with ourself, right? As opposed to constantly being taken and distracted by the noise out there. Taurus reminds us to just slow right down, which is a good thing, right? Think about the the experience and the practice of yoga. And I mean, that can include physical postures for sure, but I'm just talking about now the conscious practice of breath work, right? And the power in that. If you are feeling anxious and mentally disorientated, or mentally, frazzled and just busy, and, your mind is just chaotic, one of the best things you can do is just stop, just take a seat on the floor, on your bed, wherever, and just bring your attention into your breathing space, right? Your lungs, your core, your diaphragm, that whole zone there, and focus your whole attention on each breath. And what you'll notice is that the mind will jump to an idea, what you forgot to do, what you want to do, what you're thinking about, what somebody said yesterday, etc. Right? And even though the mind will do that, all you need to do is bring that mind back to focusing on the breath. And as you do that, your heart rate will slow down, your body will relax. Every breath helps the body relax, right? So this is the wisdom of Taurus, of slowing down and being in touch with the body. So, instead of thinking, oh, what can I get with Jupiter in Taurus? What are all the goodies I can get? It's also wise to think about what you can give and what you give to yourself as well as others, of course, too. So let me just bring up the chart, actually, for this ingression. So this is today's chart, and so let's just animate it for tomorrow. And there it is there. Jupiter is in Taurus. In the southern hemisphere, that takes place on the 17th of May. And for you guys, it will be the 16th that are in the northern hemisphere. So, let me just... Okay. So, Mars will ingress into Leo, which I'll show you shortly. There's Pluto in Aquarius, and one of the biggest transits that occurs when Jupiter ingresses into Taurus and Mars goes into Leo, which is in a couple of days' time, is this T-square between the three of them. This is a very powerful configuration of planetary energies. We're talking about Pluto and Mars, which are the planets of willpower, desire, intensity, powerful feelings, obsession, control. Let's just come up on the screen. Let me just get rid of it. I don't know if you guys can see it, but then get rid of it. Actually, I think it's fine. Let me just bring Mars to Leo so that we can. So basically there, Mars in Leo, Pluto in Aquarius, Jupiter in Taurus. So those are the fixed signs, right? Three of them anyway. Other one's Scorpio, of course. So we can really bring into this the nodes as well, just to amplify it and create it into a grand fixed cross, if you like. See, it forms the shape of a cross. So that's a grand fixed cross. It's called a grand fixed cross because it involves the four fixed signs. Although there's no planet down here, there is a south node. But just going back to Jupiter, well, this configuration will be in play actually for quite a while, because I take it as far as Mars reaching about 8 degrees of Leo. And even though that's beyond the exactness, as it were, it's still within range. So if that is the case, then the energy of this T-square with Jupiter-Mars-Pluto is in play from, say, the 21st of May, I had it written down, to it's the 4th of June. It's about the 4th of June because, yes, it was. So this configuration, Jupiter, Mars, Pluto, the T-square of this energy, is actually for about 2 weeks. And that's, I mean, even though 2 weeks is nothing, it can go like that. It's still a significant 2-week period because of the nature of the planets involved and the nature of the aspect. It's a very, 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 very intense aspect. Jupiter-Pluto is a wonderful combination, actually. If you ever have transiting Jupiter passing over your Pluto, or Pluto passing over your Jupiter, in this case, we have it, you know, as a collective transit, Jupiter square Pluto. It's basically the ultimate signature for regenerating your faith. So if you've gone through a period, whether that's been months or even years for that matter, where your sense of faith and confidence and hope in the world, in life, in your own life, has been hampered by the circumstances in your life, this is the signature for renewal of faith and belief, hope and confidence. I mean, Pluto is the force that speaks to regenerating, transforming, right? Reviving, rebirthing. And what is it? How is it doing all of that? It's doing that with Jupiter, which is the archetype of wisdom, right? Faith, confidence, hope, belief, trust. Jupiter is, when Jupiter is activated in our heart, in our body, in our philosophical orientation to life, it really inspires having that faith and that belief beyond the logical left brain reasoning or explanation of things. Jupiter has blind faith, as it were. It can feel into the intelligence, right, of the intelligence and wisdom of divine source creation to all things, and trust in that process, that divine process. It's a very powerful energy. So, you know, Pluto, Jupiter really inspires that desire to grow and regenerate your own sense of faith and belief and confidence in life, in yourself and in the world, regardless of what's appearing out there. Everything out there might look quite bleak, and it does in a lot of ways. There's no question about that. Which again, yesterday I was talking about, you know, being consciously aware of where we are choosing to invest our time and our energy. This energy here, when it's focused into what it signifies, it can regenerate your whole belief, right, in life, right? However, it also does require us to consciously tune into that. You know, it's if we don't focus on what we are putting our energy into, then our energy is just dispersed all over the shop, and that's why we feel like we are all over the place. But Taurus really does get us to focus and get back into that center, that groundedness, right? It's a fixed sign, right? It can be very stable. It's the Rock of Gibraltar, Taurus. So it can get us to really focus and stabilize where we need to stabilize ourselves. So this stabilization energy with Jupiter in Taurus, squaring Pluto in Aquarius, it's that deep, powerful focus in our own sense of faith, regardless of what's appearing out there. But we must turn our attention to it. It's not going to happen automatically, as it were. It's not going to fall out of the sky, right? Nothing falls out of the sky. Everything is our own doing, mostly unconsciously, I will add. But when we focus consciously as much as we can utilize these portals and these energies from a point of awareness and focus. Think about artists and people who create anything that corresponds to art. There are millions of different aspects of art, right? But when somebody focuses on something, or even if you're an athlete or in your work, whatever it is, when you focus at something to the exclusion of everything else, the intense portal that you move into because of that focus, so much can be created from that place because your energy is not being pulled and pushed and distracted and frazzled by the myriad of things that are going on out there. You are harnessing and focusing that energy. And that's why breath work is so powerful, because it gets you to be completely present and centered, and all your energy is pulled into that one breath, that space in that time. It is extremely powerful. The same applies to, and we're talking about these portals of energies, if we can harness that energy, and harnessing is a good word for Taurus as well, bring that energy in and just focus it on what it is that we want to focus on, right? Jupiter in Taurus is focused on stabilizing the energies, on creating foundations, solid foundations. Now, Jupiter in Taurus is the second sign of the zodiac, right? So from the point of view of the growth of this entire cycle, we're only at the second sign, right? But the second sign is important from putting in the, what's the word? If you're thinking about building a house, right? Taurus would be the land, the foundation, and then the scaffolding, I think it is, would be part of that building of the Taurus, right? So think about the building of the whole home, right? It has a journey, right from the beginning, especially if you're doing it from scratch, like you buy the land and then you think about the building plans and, how it's all going to work, right? So that process can be applied, right, with Jupiter in Taurus, just generally speaking, with wherever Jupiter is in the chart. You are building something, you're creating the foundations for the richness of what's going to expand over the next 11 years, because that's how long it's going to take for Jupiter to go all the way around the zodiac and back into Aries again. So there's a year for each sign with Jupiter, because it has a 12-year cycle, and each part of that 1 year is an opportunity to grow with Jupiter through that sign, through that house, through that archetype, through that energy, and understand what that archetype represents. So instead of wanting it all with Jupiter in Taurus, think about what Jupiter in Taurus represents. It's the laying down of the foundations. And if we can work with that in mind with wherever Jupiter is in the chart, I think that's when we can probably see a lot of benefit. And also understanding that Taurus moves slowly, things happen slowly. It's a process, doesn't come quickly. So patience is a virtue, right? Now, if we add Mars into this picture with this T-square, there's tremendous desire, ability, power to that injects right into that Jupiter. Now, because it is in Taurus, of course, it does speak largely to the material realm. So I think, there can be a 2-week period there as this T-square is activated, where we might just feel a greater sense of will, energy, desire, confidence in injecting into that Jupiter in Taurus. The Mars-Pluto is going straight into that Jupiter, that energy. Two planets that have to do with willpower. I guess if there was any cautionary stuff, it would be, Mars-Pluto is an undeniable force, an undeniable energy. It can be extremely powerful for better or for worse. It depends on how that energy is embodied within you, and or if it's being projected. Now, with Jupiter in Taurus, again, Taurus can be the sign of greed. Well, it is the sign of greed when it's operating at that purely personality level. So with Jupiter there, it can be, I can have everything because I have the will, Mars-Pluto, to have it. I have that desire, So we can lose sight of the richness that Jupiter in Taurus can bring, right? By the greed that can come up as well. I can't help but remembering the time where in 2020, where there was all these lockdowns and all this craziness going on, and they created an environment where they created a moral panic in the human race, and people were running to the stores and they were fighting, bashing each other over toilet paper. Over toilet paper. Let's get a fucking grip. Let's think about that for a second. I'm sure everyone's forgotten about it, and if they were participated in that ludicrous narrative in that way, where they were bashing people or pushing people out the way to grab the last toilet paper rolls, I'm sure they're probably feeling a great deal of shame about that right now. See what greed does? Moral panic, fear, greed. I mean, shit, pardon the pun and the expression, but back in the day, they never even used to use toilet paper. There's something called water, which is actually a lot more healthier. See what happens to the ego, personality, the insatiable sense of greed. That's Taurus operating at that shadow level, paranoid from Scorpio. Oh, I better get that last thing, because if I don't get it, I'm not going to survive. And I've got to push that person out the way before they get it. I've got to have it first. That's the Taurus side that is really unconscious. So when you're thinking about Mars-Pluto square, Jupiter, that side of things can be projected, in someone's reality, as it were, and can be really over the top, right? So it's about each individual consciously harnessing this energy to produce the most bountiful and beneficial results that are not based on greed, but based on caring about something bigger than just having enough fucking toilet paper in your house. Okay, and what else? So Jupiter-Pluto, some principles: a feeling of great resources and potential, inner stature and authority, a broad and deep experience of life, dramatic opportunities for regeneration and transformation, titanic evolutionary forces, extreme material or spiritual ambition, a tendency to feel high and mighty, which threatens those in authority, an obsession with glory and greatness, opportunities to abuse power. a feeling of greatness and potential, capacity for enormous success, brilliant gifts of organization, sustained career drives, empowerment through education, intense urges to improve. I like that, intense urges to improve, Jupiter-Pluto. Yeah. I began to see clearly in every physical phenomenon the striving for superiority. All our functions follow its direction, rightly or wrongly. They strive for conquest and increase. The impetus from minus to plus is never ending. That's so true. The urge from below to above never ceases. The great upward drive. A conscious facing of power issues, destruction of any illusions about selfish personal gain, the recognition that power either benefits all or not one. Power is the ability to do good things for others. What is not good for the sworn is not good for the bee. An ethic of right makes might, as opposed to might makes right. Dramatic opportunities for regeneration, transformation, deep and thorough healing, complete overhauls, a desire and ability to transform mind, body, soul, culture. The spiritual blood transfusion, a sense of powerful healing, waves coursing through one's body and psyche. A transition from decay to fertilizer, beneficial destruction, heavy experiences with a positive outcome, the long trip into and through the underworld of the psyche. That's probably one of my favorite lines so far. Let me just sorry, I have to underline this because it's just brilliant. The long trip into and through the underworld of the psyche. I love that because I've never been driven and motivated by money. I enjoy it when it's there. I do feel a sense of insecurity when it's not there and I can't pay my bills, for instance. But it's not the driving force or motivator for me in terms of what gives meaning to my life and what really makes me happy and what excites me. What excites me is when my soul is excited and stimulated through the depth of wisdom. That's what excites me the most. Sure, I appreciate the luxuries and sensualities of life, for sure. I've got a very strong Venus in my chart, but the money thing is not the motivating factor for me. It never has been. And I'm not saying it's wrong if it is that for somebody. We are all different. Our soul's evolution has got different intentions, different purposes, different evolutionary lessons to experience and learn in every life, So, and that's a really good point because, like I said at the very beginning, you can have everything but not all at once. If you understand the wisdom in that statement, gosh, you probably would eliminate so much suffering and worry that is there because of the opposite to that being, but I want this and I don't have it. Why does that person have it and I don't? When we sit in that space and compare from that level, we'll just be in misery because there'll be no answer and no rational explanation that will sustain a level of understanding about those questions. It'll just be why. It's not fair. It's just not fair. Why don't I have that? We can't go through life viewing it in that way because we disempower ourselves and we're always left in a position where we are feeling Like we're unhappy, we don't have enough. So understanding you can have it all, but not all at once is a great motto, right? To just bring into your awareness on a day-to-day basis. It grounds you, it puts you in a really, it puts you in a powerful position, because then you start to focus on what is there? What is here in my life? What's come into my life? What is here right now? So what am I working with? Where do I really need to grow? And growth is a wonderful word for Jupiter, because that's what it stimulates, growth. So rather than, thinking about everything that everybody else has, or the things that you wish you had, as it were, it's far more productive and positive to focus on what you do have and how you can utilize that for your own growth and evolution and development. The long trip into and through the underworld of the psyche. If I cannot bend the gods above, then I will move the internal regions. The undreamed of benefits of psycho-spiritual death and rebirth. These are key points I'm reading about the themes connecting to Jupiter-Pluto. The death-rebirth struggle, with an emphasis on rebirth, triumph through facing death, the titanic drive toward rebirth, the ongoing struggle for purification, the successful purging of karma, activation of the inner kundalini, evolutionary forces in overdrive. Oh, I love that. I love that. Evolutionary forces in overdrive. That's it. Now that excites me. Knowing that, feeling into that. Intense idealism, the will to believe, the faith to move mountains. The faith to move mountains, right? Effective activism or philanthropy. The urge to share one's transformative experiences with the larger culture. Personal healing that benefits everyone. That I love too. The power of truth. The ideal of the enlightened ruler, the philosopher king. The height of the tree is equal to the depth of its roots. Ah, beautiful. I love that. The height of the tree is equal to the depths of its roots. Wow. How's that for Taurus and Jupiter and Taurus? Although he's not talking about Jupiter and Taurus, he's talking about Jupiter-Pluto combination. But this statement here, roots, is Taurus. This is where we are, planting, laying down the foundations, the roots. The roots that you instill, that you create, foundations that you create, will ultimately define what blossoms and grows from that, right? So think about Jupiter and Taurus as the roots, the foundations that you are laying down for the tree that's going to blossom and grow, and the fruits that it will give to you as it gets to its next stages, which will be Jupiter through the other signs. The struggle between pride and deep self-exploration, or between material expansion and true evolution. So those are some key themes, and I know some of you will ask, so that's where I was reading from. And if someone can't see it, I'll just read it. It's called The Archetypal Universe by Red Butler. It's a great book. Then I was looking at keywords out of this book. This is one of my other favorite books. It's called The Rulership Book. And so for Jupiter, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There's 15 pages. 15 pages, and look at each page. There's a lot of words per page. 15 pages of, there's hundreds of words here that all correspond to Jupiter. And I'm mentioning that because this shows you all the different things in life that correspond to Jupiter. And there's a lot. There's so many things in here that you would have never made that connection. You would have never thought that. You would never think that Jupiter corresponds to, let me just read something that would sound really weird. Whales and whale hunters connects to Jupiter. There you go. There's a pretty obscure one. God, there's so much. Velvet corresponds to Jupiter. Vespers. Virgins, virginity, virtue, deeds of virtue. Vows. You know, it's basically in alphabetical order, right? So in alphabetical order, every single word in alphabetical order that describes a particular thing, condition, state of this experience here connecting to Jupiter. You'll get so many ideas. That's why I've recommended this book many times before. Just thought I'd bring it up again because there are just so many things to stimulate your understanding and your thinking about Jupiter, and certainly Jupiter in Taurus as well. So those are my main points about Jupiter in Taurus, and yeah, hopefully that gives you some insights and things to consider for yourself. And I think being realistic and being grounded is the way to work with this energy. Because getting carried away and just assuming that because Jupiter is in Taurus, you know, you're going to pull all this stuff in, all these resources in. It doesn't work like that for everyone. So I like to be realistic, transparent, honest, and, you know, say it how it is, and speak to the holistic view, and the sort of infinite possibilities, and then bringing it back to our own personal evolution, and therefore what does our chart reflect about Jupiter natally, because all of those matters will describe your Jupiter transit. In addition to that, one other thing that I forgot to mention that we must take into account is that every Jupiter transit in Taurus is every 12 years, right? So every 12 years, you're 12 years older, obviously. And so therefore, you are at a different stage in life as well. That's another thing that we must consider. You know, if you're 12 years old and you're having Jupiter move through your second house, right? That's not going to be you going and investing in crypto or silver or gold or whatever. Might be your parents doing that though. Or you might just get lots of toys that year. So when you are 24 years old, you know, that Jupiter transits, it's different, isn't it? Because that's really like the entry, if you like, into young adult life. Like it sort of starts before then, but we could say from like 2021. But I think 24 is, which is a Jupiter return, is a really prominent time in our life from the point of view of us trying to find a sense of meaning in our life. I think it sort of begins there, if not earlier. For me, it began when I was just a child, personally speaking. But I've got Jupiter and Sag in my chart, so I've been a seeker, I think, whilst I was in my mother's womb. I'm sure when I was in there, I was asking questions through the soul. You know, I was kind of inquiring already, because truth and wisdom and the soul, the intelligence and the wisdom that exists in those dimensions is infinite, and it is truly beautiful. And that's what dazzles and lights up who I am. So anyway, I think that's probably enough for today. And just a couple of other things. So Jupiter is a benefic planet. So I think I may have mentioned before. But one thing I forgot to mention is that it's in Venus's sign Taurus, which is the other benefic. So I guess from that perspective, there's this dual energy of benefic, benefit, beneficial, benevolence with our journey through Jupiter. And the benevolence and the benefit and the expansion and growth that can come through that will largely depend on how we focus that energy, right? And remembering the motto of you can have everything but not all at once, and the soul will choose to have certain experiences for very specific reasons and not have others for very specific reasons as well. So when we come to understand that, to have some acceptance and tune deeper into, you know, our soul's calling and why it's choosing to have certain things or lessons and why it's choosing not to have other lessons or experiences, I think we can be more at peace with our life and with who we are. So see you guys soon with more much love and many star blessings, and happy new moon for what's coming up in a few days' time. Bye for now.